get up from their seat and walk around the stage during the forum, applauding, cheering, supporting the candidate. Disrespecting or booing an opposing candidate is not allowed. No surrogate can speak for a candidate. Cell phones should be turned off or muted during the forum. And because the audience member may record even portions of the event. Now, let's begin by introducing the candidates. First, Charlie Verdin, Karen Ulick, Dina Trasoff, Alex Terrazas, Rabbi Shaw, Miranda Schubert, Teresa Real, Vince Rabago, Ted Przulski, Pamela Powers, Christopher Layton.
I do have a wealth of experience. And share a common vision. I think this experience, these values.
My vision, my sort of pie-in-the-sky dream, is for a future in which we actively work to rebuild a sense of community. I want to encourage people to get to know their neighbors and to get involved with their neighborhood associations. I want to help neighborhood associations to communicate and collaborate with each other. I want to help build together to identify problems and opportunities to grow and improve our neighborhoods
and to help each other when needed. I want people to look around and see not a city full of strangers, but fellow Tucsonans, neighbors and friends, all working together to make our home the strong, safe, and kind place I think it can be. Communities have eroded steadily in the past couple of decades as we become more insular. But we can turn that around if we make it a priority and work together to change that trajectory. To that end, as a city council member, the thing I'm most interested in maintaining is Steve Kozachik's dedication to constituent services, that is, working together directly with the people of the city. He made a point of being accessible and helpful to anyone who came to him with a problem, and he kept people informed. I want to ensure the Ward 6 office continues to be a place that people can come to and rely on. Thank you all for having me. Again, I'm Charlie Verdin, and it's an honor to be here. Thank you.
Karen Ulick.
Thank you. I'm Karen Ulick, and I think what I'll do is summarize what I put in my cover letter application. It's always and a vulnerable feeling to be in front of so many good folks from across the city, in Ward 6 in particular, I'm sure tonight. It took me a while to decide whether or not to apply, and a couple of things left me believing that it might be the right thing to do. As you may know, I served on the City Council for 12 years. I was elected to 3 terms in office. So you have a full track record to measure me on. And I think also many in the community got to know how I carry myself in office, my temperament, my style, my way of delivering for, at that time, Ward 3, and for the entire community. That was my commitment. I do agree that constituent services are critical, and when I stepped in on an interim basis, as this is, one of the first things I did was ask the staff in that office whether they would consider serving with me. And I have reached out to the Ward 6 staff. They have not, and I don't mean to put them in any, they could serve with any one of us. But I recognize the importance and the critical role of a well-established staff with a good reputation. Steve established that with his team, and so if I were to make the top 4, I would certainly meet with them first thing and discuss that further. I've I'm concerned that we have a new city manager coming on, quite frankly, and that was one of the reasons that I stepped in. I've served with 5, and I want to support this next one.
Thank you. Nina Trasoff.
Thank you. I had the honor of serving as your council member from 2005 to 2009, and it was one of the most challenging, satisfying, and frustrating experiences of my life. Not necessarily in that order. I loved that time. I've served on dozens of boards, and that's a kind of contribution to the city that's important. But this was a different level of service. And I think the things that I take greatest pride in looking back are 2 things, and I'll do the semi-facetious one first. It's the elephants at the zoo. But I had to fight to help get the expansion area so that we could keep elephants because they were going to be taken away. And the result is I think I have 3 great grandbabies who are elephants. The only girls I have, mine are all boys. And that was working with colleagues to make this happen. It's always a team effort. Downtown revitalization is what I take the greatest pride in, because that is within, as you know, within Ward 6. And they had tried to revitalize downtown 2 or 3 times, and it had not gone well. And I'm very proud of the role that I played in helping to facilitate that. Again, always with colleagues, but it was my lead. Bob Walkup and I got the modern streetcar with lobbying in D.C. and really fighting to get that federal money. And then there's all of the redevelopment that's happened along that route, whether it's on 4th Avenue or certainly downtown, out to the west side. And that was one of the things, that's where Regina came in, because she was saying, don't forget the west side, when she was council member out there. And it was the smartest thing to do to tie this whole community together. So as for why I'm running, a moment of insanity, it's a way to wrap a ribbon around the things that I started 14, 15 years ago and bring them to closure and walk away.
Thank you. Alex Terrazas.
Hello. My name is Alex Terrazas. I think the city would benefit from having an entrepreneurial scientist with a mental health research background advising the city. I've worked in academia as a serial entrepreneur and as a tech executive in a Fortune 500 company. I believe this is a unique set of perspectives that I can bring to the role of city council. I would like to use my background in psychiatric research to help guide the city council and mayor in public health and mental health services and policies. I would propose a half-cent 10-year income state sales tax increase to fund evidence-based mental health and substance use treatment. My background in psychology can be used in other ways to encourage and nudge our citizens towards healthier lifestyle and better sustainable behaviors. My background in data science and AI can produce a more efficient and transparent government. I would propose the Tucson Open Data Initiative to open source a substantial amount of Tucson's data so that entrepreneurs and other interested parties can develop interesting products based on our data and to improve our transparency of our government. My background as an entrepreneur and as a tech executive would allow me to foster our startup community here in Tucson, and I would like to increase the number of federally funded small business innovation research grants to Tucson startups. Finally, my status as a newcomer, I believe that the City Council and Mayor should appoint a newcomer to fulfill Steve's seat. Newcomers can bring new sets of eyes to old problems, and that's what I'd like to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Ravi Shah.
Thank you. My name is Ravi Shah, and I'm here seeking the appointment for Ward 6 City Council so that I can use a lifetime of what I've learned in leadership and advocacy and public service to work with all of you to really help improve our city and create a healthier Tucson for a brighter future for all of us. My advocacy started as a child, working with my mom and advocating for our local public library. As a young gay man out in college and in medical school, I fought for LGBTQ rights 25 years ago before it became safe to do so. In medical school and then as a new physician, I'm a family physician, I fought for health equity and justice for communities of color. And I learned how to use my voice as a family physician to fight for others when I worked with our unions and other folks to shut down coal power plants that were polluting air for immigrant communities in Southwest Chicago 15 years ago. Here in Tucson for almost a decade now, I've worked on many of these issues as well. I partnered with the now late Richard Elias to ban conversion therapy for LGBTQ youth. And at my time, I spent 2 years as CEO of the Southern Arizona AIDS Foundation, where I worked with others in our community to address housing insecurity and food insecurity. Most recently, I was elected in 2020 to serve as a governing board member for the TUSD Governing Board. And I fought for educational equity and to help create better, safer schools for all Tucson families. I want to use all this I've learned, I want to use all these successes to work with you, to work with our community members, our neighborhood associations, with others throughout the city to create a healthier Tucson. And I don't mean just by health and mental illness, but making sure we're healthy financially and economically, environmentally, and transportationally. So we can create a better Tucson for a healthier future for all of our communities and our kids. Thank you.
Thank you. Miranda Schubert.
My name is Miranda Schubert, and I'm pursuing the Ward 6 seat on Tucson City Council because I want to work with you to make this a city in which everybody can thrive, especially working families and our most vulnerable populations. As a council member, I would bring a perspective informed by a wide range of experiences. Up until a few years ago, my adult life had been a jumble of irregular moves to various rental properties around the city, mostly in Ward 6. I understand the stress and indignity of living with housing instability and the crushing cycle of scraping by without having enough income to ever save up. The seeds that have been planted over the years and led to my standing before you today are diverse, from struggling through young adulthood without a car and our oppressive car-centric infrastructure, to applying for food stamps and paying student loan debt as a full-time employee supporting an unemployed partner, to witnessing the community's outcry for more investment in holistic approaches to making our communities safer in 2020. Over a decade ago, my introduction to the beauty of Tucson's unique and diverse makeup was through the windows of the 2 buses I relied on to get to my job at Pima Community College's Desert Vista campus, just south of Irvington Road from the duplex I rented in Pie Allen neighborhood next to the U of A. The trip was an hour and a half each way. I believe in investing in making our public transit system world-class and fare-free for all. I also believe that investing in public infrastructure, building more affordable and missing middle housing, and encouraging mixed-use neighborhood-scale development are crucial if we want to improve conditions for working families. As a Ward 6 council member, I would continue delivering high-quality constituent services by leveraging my 15 years of professional experience in higher education, where I empower diverse individuals to navigate complex systems and access resources. I would work tirelessly every day to nurture and strengthen connections between constituents and local government, because as a community organizer, I understand that building relationships with each other is an essential part of being able to navigate difficult conversations in order to find solutions to nuanced issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Teresa Rial.
Hi, I'm Teresa Riel, and it is thrilling to be up here with so many amazing people. So I think that the City Council, the Mayor, and the Council have a task ahead of them, but they've got a lot of great people, so thank you for all stepping up. I have lived in Ward 6 since the mid-90s. Steve Kay and his staff know me by at least, oh, here she comes again. I do think that what Steve did in Ward 6 was amazing. I agree with what everybody has said. I feel that I have had a lot of experience with the different projects that have been proposed for an empty lot in my neighborhood. I've been on my governing board of the neighborhood association for about 16 of the 26 years I've lived in the neighborhood. I've talked to every single neighborhood association within a 5-mile radius to make sure that everybody realizes that it's our voices meeting with our elected officials that get amazing things done for our neighbors and for our communities. In 2021, I was asked to run for the Pima Community Community College Board of Governors, and I ran a campaign that was pretty much not expected to win. I did win. My opponent raised more than 10 times the amount of money that I raised. I knocked on more than 12,000 doors in that 13-month period before the election, and I feel like I really got a really good sense of what people are needing in our community. I think that on a council or a governing board like I'm currently sitting on, it takes a lot of different voices and it takes good workers. I'm willing to do the work. I've always done the work. My children went to TUSD schools, and even when they weren't in marching band or even weren't in the programs that I started off with, I continued to be an advocate and a leader in those positions. So hard work doesn't scare me, and I'm really looking forward to this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. Vince Rabago.
Good evening, everybody. It's great to be here. So what I see for our community is a lot of what has been said. We all want a better Tucson. We want good services, we want good housing, we want public safety, we want equity in transportation, we want inclusion, and that means inclusion with the neighborhoods, with constituents, with business owners, with our regional partners. All of those things are what we need, and there's been great work going on. I think I can contribute to that. I have a lot to offer, and so let me tell you a little bit about myself, because those are the building blocks, that we need to keep going. And let me say this first, we have, like I mentioned, the biggest thing obviously is the budget. Those things all flow outward, and the policy decisions flow into economic development, and all of those things I mentioned. So, why did I throw my name in the hat? I waited to the end, I looked to see who was running and putting their name in there, and I thought, I have something to offer here. I've lived in the ward for over 2 decades. My children were raised in the ward. I was a neighborhood association president. I've served on the city redistricting committee. In the greater region, I was one of the co-chairs for a nonpartisan bond campaign for the new Pima Animal Care Center. So I've been involved in a wide variety of things. I'm a small business owner, and I've been an attorney in the Tucson area for over 2 decades, and I've been practicing law for 30. Now, what's good about my background is that I've worked in those areas, working in the law on issues having to do with housing, economic development, land use, government policy, working with different governments, whether it be the state, local, or other municipalities. I've worked in the criminal justice system. I've been a criminal prosecutor, so I also understand public safety issues. I know how important it is to keep the constituent services. I was glad to hear what Karen said, and I also reached out and said, I don't want to change any staff. We have a great staff there at Ward 6. So I want to be inclusive. I want to bring my dedication, my commitment, and all those years of experience and knowledge to make it a better Tucson.
Thank you. Ted Przelski.
All right, you got it right that time. That's good. My name's Ted Przelski. I've lived in Ward 6 for over 20 years. I actually live 5 blocks from the Ward 6 office, so I'm the most environmentally responsible choice. So I've actually been working at the Ward 2 office since 2012, and in that time I have learned a lot about how a ward office actually works, and a lot of it is constituent services, basic stuff. People might be calling about issues, but most of the time they're calling about potholes or their trash didn't get picked up, and that's the sort of thing we need to get right before we can handle the big stuff, and we're doing a lot better at that as a city, I think, that I've seen in the time that I've worked there. The other thing in our office that surprised me was we have 3 people with disabilities that work in our office, and I've learned a lot about what they go through. And our office runs Tucson Disability Pride Day, which I've been able to get involved in, and it's been amazing. And it's the thing that I'm most proud of so far working in the office, and I hope we can do more things like that. The other thing I've learned a lot about is about water issues, how water issues actually work, and how it affects everything from annexation policy to development, and so I'd like to be an advocate on those issues as a council member. The other thing is I pledged not to run for a full term. I think that's very important that the mayor and council don't put a thumb on the scale for what's going to be a very exciting primary. Let's let the voters decide who gets the full term.
Thank you. Pamela Powers.
I want to thank the League of Women Voters for hosting this event and filming it and giving us all an opportunity to talk with you tonight. So my name is Pam Powers. I live in Ward 6 and I've moved to Tucson in 1981, and most of my time in Tucson has been in Ward 6. I've lived in Pie Allen, West University, and now the Palo Verde neighborhood. And so part of the reason that I put my name in for this is that, you know, I moved here as a young, pregnant 30-something, and we started a family here. And so both of our kids and all 4 of our grandchildren were born and raised in Tucson, and all but one of them is still living here. And so I care about Tucson because I want to see Tucson be sustainable and keep its funky side into the future. I don't think we should lose what makes Tucson special as we're, you know, progressing in the future. I think that also my experience as being a state legislator, I was a legislator for 6 years. I was reelected. I was elected 3 times, and the old LD9 it crosses over Ward 6 and most of the northern part of Tucson. And so I think it's helpful to have somebody who served in the belly of the beast up in Phoenix. You know, there's a certain type of attitude up there, and it's helpful for people in Tucson to understand, because a lot of the economic problems we have right now are caused by the state legislature. And so in the legislature, I served on several of the money committees. Dr. Randy Freeze said, he kind of apologized for putting me on the banking and insurance committee. He says, there's not a lot of Democrats who are good at math, but you're good at math. And so I was on the banking insurance, I was on Ways and Means, I was on commerce, I was on regulatory affairs, and since I have a master's in public health, they also let me be on health. And so I think that that type of experience with looking at budgets and negotiating budgets and writing grants, this background in finance, I think, is going to help us make better decisions. And sorry, I didn't see your stop sign over there.
Thank you. Christopher Layton.
Thank you. My name's Chris Layton. I'm excited to be here tonight. I decided to go ahead and run for this position because I've been working in Ward 6 and living in Ward 6 for 40 years. I used to work for the city of Tucson for 25 of those. I think I've worked with pretty much every single neighborhood in Ward 6, as well as actually all neighborhoods citywide, but Ward 6 primarily. I've been very involved in the downtown revitalization. I started Parkwise. We also started the Business Improvement District immediately thereafter, because Parkwise could take care of parking, but if there was nothing to park for, why bother? And then between the two of those, they saved legislation in order to get Rio Nuevo passed by the voters. So those were kind of the 3 legs to the stool that made downtown work and has made it progress significantly. It's still got a long ways to go. I've been very driven on that because it's the heart of the city, and quite honestly, Ward 6 is the heart of the city, in my opinion. And without a healthy heart, the rest of the city can't thrive. So I would love the opportunity. I have worked with all the current council staff as well. The Ward 6 current staff do a great job. I would want to keep them on, both as long as they would want to work for me. Anyway, I've also been very environmentally conscious, I guess. I built the first solar-powered parking garage in the world. I did a lot of the road diets before road diets were popular, or even had a name. And so I've been trying to just basically improve the quality of living for Ward 6 for years. Thanks.
Thank you. We'll now move on to questions that have been provided. Each candidate will have 1 minute to respond. We will begin first with Karen Ulick, and then we will move on and rotate back around to Charlie Verdon. Okay? First question. Will new city council persons keep the plastic recycling program going?
One of the reasons that I think I would be well suited to stepping in on this shorter term is that as I experienced with Paul Cunningham's departure, it's so important that the initiatives that have been started were started because Ward 6 residents wanted to see that done, and Steve Kozachik and his team delivered it. And so rather than sweeping into Ward 3 when Paul stepped down, Paul Cunningham, he was very advanced with EVV and setting up charging stations and really bolstering our solar infrastructure. It's important to deliver on what's been started. So meeting with Steve and his team is going to be critical. That and his advocacy on PFAS to keep our water clean. There are critical issues that have been identified that I would follow through on, yes.
Thank you. Nina Trasoff.
I would absolutely want to follow through on that. I did spend a couple of hours a couple of weeks ago with the Ward 6 staff. With the Ward 6 staff. They are an amazing group of women and one male volunteer who's fabulous. But they are so committed to what they're doing and so knowledgeable and so good at constituent services. But this is one of the keystones that I really think needs to be moved forward. And there are issues in how it's going to move forward that are beyond Ward 6's control. So I would welcome the chance to work with them to make that happen. It's a fabulous staff, and why mess with what's working? But yes, absolutely, the recycling I think is very important that we follow through on and expand if possible.
Thank you. Alex Terrazas.
Yes, I would keep the plastic recycling program going. I would look to ways to expand it, and I would also look to find ways to gather credibility in the community around what happens to the recycled products once we let go of them.
Thank you. Ravi Shah.
One of the biggest things I'm working on in my role right now in the TUSD Governing Board is to have a new climate action policy. And I give props to the Arizona Youth Climate Coalition, a group of undergrad and high school students who have been working on this with me for almost 9 months now. And if we pass this in its current form, it won't be just an important climate action policy for our district, but it'll actually lead the nation in one of the most comprehensive climate action policies to help with climate mitigation as well as climate resiliency. So I hope to get this passed on the school board, and I hope to work on recycling and a number of issues on the city council to really move the needle on climate action and climate change.
Thank you. Miranda Schubert.
Yes, I would definitely keep the program. I think it is an innovative and exciting project. I think it's just the kind of thing that I really think that Tucson has made a hallmark of our local character, that we're innovative, that we work with the resources that we have, that we're passionate about each doing our part to address climate change. Yes, and I also am very supportive of measures toward zero waste, toward reuse, toward eliminating and reducing plastics when possible. I feel cautious about making folks feel as though we can just use as many plastics as we want and it's okay now that we can build useful things out of it. I think it's really great to look for those opportunities, but at the same time, I think we need to look at more systemic, larger scale interventions to address the problem.
Thank you. Teresa Real.
Yes, definitely. I think the plastic recycling program is a very good thing. I also am an educator. I taught in Southern Arizona for more than 3 decades, the last 2 being teaching mathematics at Pima Community College. So I think that it is also not only recycling, but also we need to make sure that the educational component is out there. 1s, 2s, and 5s are the thick, solid, or more solid plastic, and those can actually go in our recycling bins that they actually pick up because the city makes money on that. But there's a lot of misinformation out there, a lot of lack of education on what the program is. So I believe in all of the environmental activities we can do, but I also think that education is what's going to take it up another level.
Thank you. Vince Rabigo.
Yes, most definitely. That program needs to continue. I'm a huge supporter of both recycling of plastics and other things, frankly, out there in the world. We need to really invest and educate and embrace those policies of repurposing, reuse, recycling, because it leads to a sustainable community, a sustainable world. I echo the words of one of their candidates. We also need to look at policies that push the needle on reduction of use of those sort of single-use plastics, that sort of thing. It's really important, not just for the city, but also, statewide, in the country and the world. Those are big issues. We need to push those sorts of things. So I'm a big believer in all of those policies, and yes, I would continue the program.
Thank you. Ted Przelski.
Yes, I want to echo everything everyone said so far because it's all great commentary on this. The other thing to think about with the way this program came into being, it came out of a ward office. And the ward offices can serve as examples for these sorts of programs. The Ward 2 office, we had rainwater harvesting to take care of our landscape. And that was something that we could say, hey, community, this is something that works and it looks nice. The other thing is about, reducing waste in the first place. I don't want to get down on everyone, but we handed out plastic bottles here. And one of the things that we tried to do at one point, and we have to, and I hope I can maybe use my powers as a city councilman, but at city events, why don't we just have a thing of water and people bring cups? Exactly. We can serve as a really, as an example, and we should do that.
Thank you. Pamela Powers.
Thank you. And so my family and I have been religiously schlepping our plastic over to those containers and our glass bottles for really since the program started. And in theory, I agree with this a lot, but I also would like to read the contract because this is a P3 and I would like to understand the finances of the recycling program. And, there's been talk about us building a plant for them. And so what are we getting out of this? And I really think that our goal should be to use less plastic, and so I don't want us to think that we are lulled into this idea that it's okay to use more plastic because we can recycle it. We really should be reducing recycling and really pushing corporations to use other containers. We used to have cartons of yogurt. Not everything was in plastic one day. So yes, I would continue it, but I want to read the contract.
Thank you. Christopher Layton.
Yes, I would keep the plastic recycling. I would want to understand the contract. I also am a little frustrated that many of the city recycling centers are shrinking or disappearing. Cardboard is hard. You have large boxes. Those have all gone away. And glass has been a little more difficult to deal with, although it's one of the easiest to recycle substances. So, yes, I would keep it.
Thank you. Our last panel member, Charlie Verdin.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm happy to see that so many of us on stage and a bunch of people out in the audience, you have your own reusable water containers, all doing our part as much as we can. I think it's, obviously, recycling is very important, especially with regard to plastics, which have has such limited reusability, generally speaking. It's always constantly degrading. We're using too much of it. So yeah, I think it's going to be important for everybody on the council to constantly be keeping an eye out for new and innovative ways to reuse the materials that we are all constantly accumulating, and yeah, seek to reduce the amount that we are accumulating.
Thank you. The next question, and we'll begin with Nina Trasoff. Will you commit to city funds for the PEMA Early Education Program scholarships, as your predecessor has? Will you commit to city funds for the PEMA Early Education Program scholarships, PEEPS, as your predecessor has? Nina Trasoff.
Absolutely. I just completed a documentary on Finland and what makes it the happiest country in the world. And it's going to be on PBS on May 12th at 5 p.m. So watch it. But one of the key elements within it, and what part of what makes it the happy society is education. A whole bunch of other things, but it's trust in government and it's education. And they start when the child is born practically. And they don't start teaching them reading, writing, and arithmetic in preschool. They start teaching them how to be good human beings and work with each other and how to learn, how to be ready to learn. And it's equitable for everybody. Every child has this, so there's no rich or poor, there's no good schools, there's no bad schools. And having a program like this so that every child in our community can get that start is absolutely critical to them, but to us as a society as a whole.
Thank you. Alex Terrazas.
Yes, as a neuroscientist in psychology, I can assure you that early education is key, and that I don't know a lot of details about those particular programs, but I can certainly tell you I support those efforts.
Thank you. Ravi Shah.
Yes, I would support those programs. On the TUSC Governing Board, I've worked to expand early educational opportunities for students throughout our district, regardless of background and regardless of ability to pay. And I think we need to do more to make sure we have opportunities for early childhood education so that we can expand it. And it's so evidence-based. There's so many good outcomes that come to making sure that we have young kids in school as early as possible, learning and growing and developing. So yes, I would support these programs.
Thank you. Miranda Schubert.
A lot of great points have already been made by other panelists. I would also say that, yes, of course, I would continue this. I'm also particularly interested in ways that officials at different levels of government can work together for more education funding in general, just because education is such an important part of so much of what breaks, for example, generational poverty, which the Prosperity Initiative, which was passed by the city and the county, talks about quite a bit. And I think that it is local government's role to look for interventions to increase the quality of life for people and to break those cycles. So yes, I would definitely support that.
Thank you. Teresa Rial.
Yes, I definitely support anything that's education. Education of young children doesn't only help their lifelong learning abilities and prospects, but it also helps the families, primarily mothers who are usually the main caregivers of young children. So it not only helps the children be able to attend school and get more education, it also helps the parents. There was something was written up in Phoenix at ASU, and I can't remember the name of the organization, but the title of the article was Billions to Gain. And it said for every 10% that we increase higher education after post-high school, every 10% that we increase, we end up having a $6 billion gain from those 10% people over their lifetime because of their learning and their work abilities. So early childhood is definitely the way to start.
Thank you. Vince Rabigo.
The answer is yes. It's a no-brainer, right? We all believe that those are key things for our children and our future, really, because the children are the future. We need to provide that support for them. I'm committed to not only keeping the budget as it is, we need to see, are there ways to expand it? And those are important things, and it's not just us, of course. There are other governments in the locality here that also contribute, and we need to look at other plans. What else can we do? It's not just sticking with the status quo that we have this and we got to pack it into the budget. Are there other things we can do? So the answer absolutely is yes.
Thank you. Ted Przelsky.
It's a simple yes, but before I worked for Paul, I worked for about 10 years at a program called Las Artes in South Tucson, and there it was older kids that had, for one reason or another, had dropped out of high school. And that program was an example of when you had a local government that cared enough to take care of these kids that most folks would have forgotten. So yes to that program, yes to things like Las Artes, Youth Build, all these things and various programs that the city cooperates with Pima College on. Let's do what we can, and I know Pamela's going to have to say a lot about this because the legislature is not that good about funding programs for youth or for education in general.
Thank you. Pamela Powers.
Thank you. And as far as I know, they never restored the child care funding that they cut like in 2010, something like that. And so I have two little granddaughters who are going to high-quality preschool right now, and they have scholarships. Their mom, my daughter, has a good job. She owns her own home and things like that, but it's really expensive. And so I support needs-based help for parents to get their kids into high-quality preschool, but we also should be knocking on Katie Hobbs' door and say, get the legislature to restore that funding, because there was a lot of funding that was restored and never brought back ever, even now.
Thank you. Christopher Layton.
Yes, I do believe early education is extremely important. Although I do have to admit I didn't go to kindergarten because they couldn't wake me up from my nap.
Thank you. Charlie Verdon.
Yeah, I mean, as a parent myself of a couple kids, my oldest is 5, my younger one is 2, almost 3. She insists she's a big girl. I don't know, baby girl, you're still in diapers. But yeah, it's expensive trying to afford daycare. Even if you have 2 parents, both of them working pretty good jobs, it's a hit to your pocketbook. And so, yeah, I think I would love to see it easier for future parents than it was for me and my wife, and anything we can do to expand access, especially for folks who have it financially harder than me, sounds like a great idea.
Thank you. Karen Ulick.
My answer is yes. I agree with many of the comments here. It makes sense in all ways. Financially, the fact that the city and county are fully aligned on this, and it's part of the prosperity framework that's been adopted, I believe we can really build upon it. We also happen to share the jail. And I think if we couple our planning and our budgeting to really look at where are we spending our money, what would we save by investing more in young children, I think we could come up with some really exciting possibilities.
Thank you. We'll move on to our third question, and we will begin with Alex Terrazas. The question: what knowledge and skills do you bring to the City Council concerning budget and finances? What knowledge and skills do you bring to the City Council concerning budget and finances? Alex Terrazas.
Yes, as a senior vice president at the Nielsen Company, I had a team of 25 professionals and managed a budget, built a business within a business, and so I have a lot of experience in that particular area. I've also been an entrepreneur and started 2 successful startups on my own, and certainly learned the hard way how to do some budgeting for a startup, which is a little bit, month to month at times. So yes, I have a lot of that experience. I also was a project management professional from the Project Management Institute. I have a lot of experience leading teams, inspiring good teamwork. My teams have always been high performing. I would like to bring that experience to this Ward 6 council role.
Thank you. Ravi Shah.
Thank you. So I'm a proud Elder graduate. I received my MBA in 2016. Go Wildcats. Easy crowd for that, I imagine. The reason I went for my MBA, I focused on financial classes and on financial books, because I wanted to help working with underserved populations my entire career. I wanted to be able to build sustainable systems for underserved healthcare. With my MBA and even before my MBA, I've done a lot of leadership roles as a physician. I was the chief medical officer for a community health center. My last position in Chicago almost 15 years ago, running a health system that was taking care of 100,000 patient visits a year. Here in Tucson, I served as CEO of the Southern Arizona AIDS Foundation, one of our community's largest nonprofit organizations, managing the budget and working with others to really expand things. And of course, in my role in the TUSC Governing Board, we have over a $500 million budget, not as large as the city of Tucson's, but a large budget. And I love being the financial go-to person to make sure that we're spending the money in the most financially sustainable and responsible ways.
Thank you. Miranda Schubert.
So I think in a more literal sense, my budgetary experience, I would point to my 7 years on an executive board for a local nonprofit, Tucson Roller Derby, a Tucson 501c3, where we were managing budgetary priorities and being strategic about how to leverage resources in order to equitably serve as a community organization. I'm also a commissioner on the Complete Streets Coordinating Council, and so we have dug into some pretty tough funding and budgetary situations. And so I imagine we are going to be confronted by many situations where there are many deserving priorities, and what it comes down to is how to best use what we have at our disposal. So I believe in participation broadly. I believe in things like participatory budgeting. I believe that we're creating an ecosystem with the way that we approach how we fund different priorities, and what we want to see flourish, the jobs, the opportunities, we must invest.
Thank you. Teresa Rial.
I am on the Pima Community College's Board of Governors, and we do budget and finance all the time. I'm on the Finance and Audit Committee there. We meet quarterly to discuss budget and investment and bonds, all of that sort of thing. I didn't know anything about it before, but I'm learning lots as I sit on those two committees. I am the treasurer of the League of Women Voters of Arizona, and we budget and we do a lot of fundraising for grants that can pay for programs possibly like this. I'm not sure if league monies are being used here. I think that my math degrees will definitely help me out. I'm not afraid of using my calculator and figuring things out. And I think that it's really important to have a transparent system in place so taxpayers know what their monies are being used for, and that the city uses those in an ethical, reasonable manner.
Thank you. Vince Rabago.
So my experience with budgeting has come from a variety of places. I've served on national association boards, I've served on statewide organization executive boards, and also I've led local organizations, and they all have their own different types of budgeting. So one of the things you have to recognize is, what are we talking? We're not talking about business, because that's a different type of budget, right? You're talking about profit. You're looking at something that is more complex, services and all the different facets that a budget represents. I've also been a fraud prosecutor for many years on a national level. Having to understand complex financial transactions is something I'm very comfortable with, because you have to track down what's happened, what's going on. And after undergraduate at the University of Arizona, I actually worked at the state legislature for the Senate Democratic staff for one session, and I learned a lot about the state budget there, and I've tracked those issues over time, both at the state level and even local, county, and city level.
Thank you.
That's what I bring.
Ted Przalski.
I serve on the board of a nonprofit radio station, Downtown Radio, and that involves a lot of budgeting and begging, as any of you that have done nonprofits know. I also served for several years on the county bond committee, which wasn't budgeting per se, but it was about priorities, and also got a crash course in how government bonding works. The thing that, it was amazing that we would find, hey, we found $10 million in capacity. Then my phone would start ringing, and all of a sudden everybody had $10 million in projects to tell me about. But it was a lot of that was going back to, various governments and nonprofits and saying, hey, how can we do this and get you some money, but we're not going to be able to pay for everything. So I've done that.
Thank you. Pamela Powers.
Yes, thank you. So I've had quite a bit of finance experience. I've had two successful small businesses, and when I was a freelance writer back in the late 80s and early 90s, I had Great American Bank and some other banks and financial institutions as my clients. In fact, my niche was writing annual reports, and I'd like to see more reports and more numbers out there. In the legislature and also at the university, I wrote grants. grants. I was a program director for the Arizona Smokers Helpline for many years. I had 40 employees. I wrote that grant every year to get funding from the state. I was principal investigator also of other grants that I wrote while I was at the university, and so I can crunch some numbers and I know how to read an Excel spreadsheet. So, and I ask a lot of questions.
Thank you. Christopher Layton.
Hi, yes, I have actually 25 years of preparing budget data for the city itself, so I'm very familiar with the process. I'm actually missing a nonprofit that is the landlord to Downtown Radio's board meeting this evening, where they're adopting their budget that I developed for them for next year. One big thing, the city is facing a big budget crunch coming up in the next 2 years that's going to take a lot of thought on how to solve.
Thank you. Charlie Verdon.
Yeah, I'm a small business owner, so I'm familiar with working with budgets in a general sense. But of course, running a government is considerably different than that. But I mean, it's a lot of math. You figure it out. I have a lot of project management experience, making certain that things do stay within budget and accomplish the goals that the budget is set out to accomplish. I also have a very questioning personality. It can be very annoying sometimes if you work with me. I promise, though, it's always the greater good. But yeah, you plan, you improve upon whatever it is that the budget is set to accomplish, and then you follow up afterwards to make certain it accomplished what you needed to, and then improve for the future. Yeah.
Thank you. Karen Ulick.
I am familiar with the city budget, and I agree that we're looking at some very difficult times. Maybe not this year, more next year, which means we need to take action now. The longer we wait to make incredibly difficult choices, the harder it's going to be and the deeper the pain will be. And George Miller, former mayor, I'll never forget when I first started on the council, said to me, Karen, the budget's a financial document and it's a moral document. So what values will we use to make those choices? How can we engage together? Ward 6 residents having a voice at the table and joining with the city to make very tough choices. I'm worried too because the state is under enormous pressure, and they always come to the cities first to solve those state problems. So we may be looking at even more challenging times. So I think it's a matter of having knowledge and also a good process and way of engaging.
Thank you. Nina Trasoff.
I mean, I've been a small business owner for decades, so I'm familiar with that. I served on the council for 4 years, so I learned the city budgeting process. I served on many boards of directors, and that was always part of it. I hate budgets. I hate finance. It's not my strength. My strength is asking questions and helping to set priorities so that you figure out what's most important first. Then, what do we have available? How do we make the best possible decisions? So my role would more be, trust me, it's not on the math side or the finance side. It's on the asking questions about what are the priorities, and once we know what we're confronted with, how do we find the balance that keeps Georgia's priorities and values, which I think is powerful, but within the limited means that we have.
Thank you. We'll move on to our next question. We'll begin with Ravi Shah. The question, what do you see the role of the ward office in working with TPD, in-place network investigations, parentheses, PNI? What do you see the role of the ward office in working with TPD, in-place network investigations, parentheses, PNI? Ravi Shah.
Thank you. I think one of the biggest catalysts that led to me to put my hat in the ring for Ward 6 and to think about City Council is experience that I've garnered over the last year as a medical director in the Pima County Jail. I took that role last summer, and I've worked with underserved medicine my entire career, but I've never worked in corrections before. I work side by side with our correction officers and others in law enforcement, and I've learned a lot about what really ails our city and what we can do better, and how many folks in our community that we've really failed. And so I think we need to really reimagine how we do policing and how we do investigations and how we do our criminal justice system here in Tucson. And one thing I've seen, and I've heard the stories, but you don't really see it until you see it and directly and in person, is just a revolving door in our jail. How many patients I've seen that were there a few months ago or a few weeks ago and are there back again today, and how we've really failed to really address recidivism and do better policing. And so I think we need to really work on this and come up with some solutions and implement some best practices to really help save our community and our city.
Thank you. Miranda Schubert.
Back in 2020, it was conversations about how we police our communities that originally got me interested in local government. And I quickly realized it was a very complex issue with a lot of different things that need to happen. But an essential part of that, I believe, is community engagement. And I think a ward office really plays a critical role in connecting constituents with the people in the city that serve them, and making sure that we're being collaborative and that we're being innovative. And so being a part of projects like this, I think, is a step in the right direction, because it's using research, it's using specificity, and really, I think that tailoring our approaches to the situation at hand is a move in the right direction. And I think that I have engaged with many community members around this topic that are at all ends of the spectrum, and some of them are activists who don't feel comfortable speaking with the police. And I think that is a valid approach, but I think as an elected official, it is our role to bridge those differences for solutions. Thank you.
Teresa Real.
The thing that happens in my neighborhood, I'm very active in my neighborhood association. We have a lot of homeless people in our neighborhood. They live in our alleys, and they have encampments on Romo's vacant property, and it's a bunch of treed area, so you can't really see it from Broadway. But they have dogs off leash, they have, drug problems out there. And I really feel that policing is more than just locking up the criminals and taking them away. I think that we have to do much more in our community to recognize why people are homeless, why we have this horrible problem with drug use, and I think we need to support police officers in knowing how to appropriately deal with these vulnerable populations.
Thank you. Vince Rabago.
I believe the program is an important program. It's a pilot program. There's 6 other cities that are doing this. And it's critical to embrace those concepts. Having been a criminal prosecutor, both in California when I first started working and also here in Arizona, here in Tucson at the Attorney General's office, I understand both the impact on victims, the impact on the community, and the issues that are also talked about that are that are underlying some of this, whether it be homelessness, drugs, mental illness. But what's critical is there is reform happening, not just in Tucson, but also across the country in different areas to look at issues of community prosecution, community engagement. It's critical to have the neighbors involved. And so that aspect of having the wards involved, it's important to continue. It's important to see what these pilot programs are going to do. And there's other organizations out there like Just Communities, a nonprofit here out of Tucson that is doing very innovative work on justice and trying to have the community have their own power. So not just relying on the ward office, but together to work these things out.
Ted Przelski.
The P&I program requires that data come from the community, and there are people that do not want to call the police for various reasons. We all know about this. And sometimes they'll call the ward office. So the ward office can be an important part of giving the police department data to implement the P&I program. And it's been part of something that there have been a lot of really innovative programs from the police department. We've got this mental health response team. They don't wear uniforms. They wear polo shirts and go out into the community and work with folks that are having mental health issues on the streets. In the last year, they have not made a single arrest, even though they've had thousands of contacts. No arrests, and they've had no violent contacts with people in the community. So I'd like to see more of these sorts of programs that are really innovative and kind of necessary, because we don't have a lot of cops right now.
Pamela Powers.
Well, I'm not going to pretend that I know all of the answers on this issue at all. This is something that I would like to learn more about. Even as a legislator, I've never been on a ride-along. I know some of the problems that are going on in our neighborhoods, and I believe in restorative justice. I think that we also need to look at adverse childhood experiences. A lot of the people who are drug addicts or maybe homeless or living on the street and have mental health problems had bad childhoods. We are forcing kids to live in poverty in this state, and so I think that we need to look at this as a holistic problem, right? And I would like to talk with the police more. I would like to know what their issues are and what they're experiencing, and also this idea of there are certain types of interactions, as Ted said, where you don't necessarily want somebody in a uniform. You want somebody who's more of a social worker type person intervening with these people beforehand. And so I think it's a complicated problem, and I would like to learn more about it.
Christopher Layton.
Yes, I think it is an important and innovative program. I personally have had experience with the mental health unit in the last year or two. That's been a great shift in how the police handle those situations where we've had some homeless encampments and drug problems at buildings we manage. The one guy in charge of it that I met, or that particular squad, had been homeless for himself for 15 years. So he really understood, and I just think it's great, some of the innovations our local police are taking on.
Thank you. Charlie Verdon.
I mean, whenever it comes to policing in general, the question that always comes to me first is how do we start to address the root causes of criminal activity before the police even have to get involved? And I think that should generally be a priority. I think the more that we invest in criminal activity prevention by helping people, assisting people out of desperate situations that would lead to criminal activity, is going to be our best priority. As for TPD in general, I think it's important to work with police to guide them and let them know where and how they should interact with neighborhoods. I think it's important to get to know your neighborhoods well enough to be able to guide them in that way so that they can interact with them respectfully and constructively. Yeah, I found in my interactions with TPD that they are receptive to that sort of guidance.
Thank you. Karen Ulick.
Yeah, I think it is an important approach and something that we want to build upon. I think that we have a great police chief right now. I think Chad Kazmar really listens to the community and to his staff to try and find the best ways to address the stresses that come upon us. We can't arrest homelessness away. We can't arrest a lot of problems away. But we might not be leveraging the partnerships, all of them, that we could. For example, I work for a Medicaid health plan right now, and I know of grants for outreach, street outreach to folks with mental illness and addiction. I'm not so sure that Suntran knows how to alert them when they need them, or the neighborhoods and TPD. So I think we can do a better job of pulling everybody together. I think the city's done a good job starting on that.
Thank you. Nina Trasoff.
I agree with virtually everything that's been said up here, especially what Karen was talking about. It's partnerships, it's prevention, it's finding alternatives, it's being creative. I mean, one of the problems is we don't have enough police officers. So it makes harder for the police officers to get to know the neighborhoods and the people within the neighborhood to be able to assess what the problems are and listen and hear. So that's something that's a whole different topic. But to me, it boils down to partnerships, creativity, and sensitivity to all of the root causes that have been discussed here. Because what Ravi sees down at the jail is something that we have to stop that revolving door. We have to break the cycles of poverty and lack of education and all of these things that feed into this unfortunate result.
Thank you. Alex Terrazas.
Well, specifically for Ward 6 and the P&I program, I think that the main thing that the Ward 6 can do is be the ears and eyes of the community and share that data with the other wards. But backing up from what Ward 6 can do specifically, my proposal for the half-cent sales tax increase to fund mental health and substance use disorder treatments is would go a long way towards helping us in this very area. Also, the use of data, my open source data proposal, would allow us to have better information systems that could make the P&I program work more efficiently. So those are some of the things that I'd like to do.
Thank you. We'll move on to our next question, and we'll begin with Miranda Schubert. And hopefully I'm reading this question correct. What is your stance on the understanding of power lines and scenic routes as proposed by the Dumas Petrie project by TEP? What is your stance on the undergrounding of power lines and scenic routes as proposed for the Dumas Petrie project by TEP? Miranda Schubert.
Well, first of all, when it comes to any issue, I believe that it's very important for the people who are most impacted by those decisions to have a seat at the table and to have a voice in the process. And I know that this has been a hotly discussed issue. I think that what I have seen is some very inspiring organizing amongst neighborhoods that have the resources and the time and the ability to do so. And what I find myself thinking as I feel inspired and admiring of that is also that I see neighborhoods in the ward that don't have those resources or that ability. And I want to ensure that those neighborhoods aren't underserved just because they can't necessarily advocate in the same way or maybe don't have the money to pay for things like lawyers. I think with any situation involving a corporation, especially one that is run by by an entity who is not only out of country, doesn't have a stake in our community and the direction it's going in, local government has an essential, very, basically a moral imperative to stand for the people and the neighborhoods.
Thank you. Teresa Real.
Ditto to what Miranda said. I think that that's in a nugget, right? If we don't protect our neighborhoods, if we don't protect the people who live there, if we're making decisions not based on what's best for our children and what's best for our yards and plants and animals, and we're doing it for corporate greed in this case, right? I think it's the wrong thing to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Vince Rabigo.
I would echo those concerns. You want to make sure, the people live here, right? A corporation doesn't live here. So whether it's a utility or not. So we have to make sure that the people's needs are taken care of and look at all of the aspects. Obviously cost is one, and impact, environmental impact, and other aspects. So I support always looking at the neighborhoods first and corporate bottom line second on those sorts of issues. That's my philosophy.
Thank you. Ted Przelski.
Thank you. I want to echo what Miranda said, but I was involved in some discussions with Tucson Electric Power when we were widening Houghton Road because they wanted to expand their footprint out there when we were doing the widening, and we tried to have a discussion with them about undergrounding, and it didn't end very pretty. But what's amazing is their thing is always about it's going to cost you money, and we can do this in other areas because they're going to pay for it. And then they come up with all this stuff about maintenance and stuff. Well, frankly, if you're able to underground it in Oro Valley and places like that, I think you can underground them here.
Thank you. Pamela Powers.
Thank you so much for this question. I think that some of the communication from TEP on this has been a little bit sketchy and hard to understand, maybe. And so I think that I don't like the idea of these giant power lines, going through neighborhoods. The maps that they've sent us don't necessarily have the street names marked on them. And I'm all for undergrounding. And I second what some of the people up here have said is that, we want to watch what the corporations are doing, right? And not necessarily do everything they want when they want it. And we do need to be careful about having enough electricity, but we also don't want to have our scenic byways destroyed by these huge power lines. And like Ted said, you can underground them other places, you can underground them here too. I'm all for more undergrounding because they might say that it's a maintenance problem, but I lived off of Grant Road and there was one day where there was a microburst down Grant Road and 15 poles fell down.
Christopher Layton.
That's a maintenance issue.
Yeah, I agree with what everyone said. I do think the zoning examiner was brilliant when he turned him down the first time they came before him. I also find it fascinating how they've kind of rebranded the whole thing and propagandized it as to now it's electric stability for the center city.
Thank you. Charlie Verdon.
We have a beautiful city. And I think, I can't tell you how many times I've wanted to just take a picture of a moment whenever the mountains over there have been just particularly spectacular. Maybe it snowed, maybe the light's just right and they're colorful. And, I go try to find the openest place I can, and, there's power lines there. And it kind of ruins the picture. Not entirely, you can find places, but yeah, I think it's generally important that we as a city prioritize the beauty of the place that we live. And in that regard, I think it is important that we do stand firm in regards to undergrounding as much as possible.
Thank you. Karen Ulick.
I think that we do need to recognize that it's going to have impact somewhere unless total undergrounding is possible. And so again, tough choices. And I think we need to look at what the options are. I will say that some of the best work recently on a somewhat similar issue is the co-location of telephone, do they still call it telephone service or is it cell service? Whatever. But really, Councilmember Kozaczek and this Ward 6 team led on this, but it popped up a lot in Ward 3 where they just wanted to randomly stick up poles everywhere, without any permissions or easements or whatever. And we worked together to try and demand as much as possible co-location. That's not the same situation, but it does show that we have to push every lever we can to make a difference.
Nina Trasoff.
Neighborhood voices have to be heard. We have to look at the beauty of our community, and we have to underground. I'm sorry, I know it's more expensive, but there have to be ways that we can preserve that which makes Tucson so special. And that's the natural beauty, but it's also the people and the quality of life we have. And the paths and the things that they've designed are incompatible with that.
Thank you. Alex Terrazas.
I say bury it. Don't give away our most valuable resources for a short-term gain. We'll never recover those views, and I don't think we should give them away cheaply. Tucson has a habit of giving away some of our most valuable resources, our historic neighborhoods and our desert, for practically nothing, and I want to see an end to that.
Thank you. Ravi Shah.
Thank you. I stood up to Big Energy in the past, and I'll stand up to Big Energy as your member of the City Council on behalf of my constituents. I think the vote last year on rate increases showed that our community don't trust EP. And 15 years ago, back when I was a young physician, I was a county doc in Chicago, working in the Cook County Health System, and we were unionized. I was a member of the SEIU in that role. And I led the union to stand up against coal power plants in Chicago. We fought against Midwest Generation. I stood up against Midwest Generation, stood up against aldermen who were in their pockets, and we shut down those coal power plants. And I stood up to Big Energy then, and I'll stand up to Big Energy on behalf of the constituents to make sure that we have an energy system that we trust.
Thank you. We'll move on to our next question, and we'll begin with Teresa Real. What ideas do you have for an aging population regarding housing, transportation, and engagement? What ideas do you have for an aging population regarding housing, transportation, and engagement? Teresa Real.
For the last 4 years, every other week, I've cooked a meal for the homeless women at Sister Jose Women's Shelter on South Park. When I first started, the average age in my estimation was most likely around 38. A year ago, the average age, I think, is like around 68. And the number of elderly women who have lost their homes, either because their spouse died or because rent went up and their fixed income, retirement income didn't go up, I think it's a huge problem, and I think that is one area that we need to get all of our organizations together, making sure we're meeting the needs of these people. I think the fact that Centran is free, I think that's a great thing for people on limited incomes, and I think that we need to make sure that just because it's not affecting me right now, I'm only 60, it's not affecting me, it might affect me in that way in 20 years, and I think it's something that we all need to work on to make sure that our city meets the needs of our vulnerable populations.
Thank you. And I just want to note that this is the last question, and then after we finish this, we'll go around to closing statements. Okay. Vince Rabago.
So those are great statements that were just made by my panelist, co-panelist up here. What we also need to do, one of the ideas, the question asked for ideas, we need to study what is going to be needed for the growth in the elderly population and how we can play a voice at the state legislature and everywhere we can to expand the resources on all three fronts, housing, transportation. Engagement is a little easier when you're talking about a ward office and in your community. But so we need to study that because that is a growing wave. Population, people are living longer, the needs are increasing. And so we're going to run into those very difficult budgetary moral choices that are being talked about because we only have so much in a budget. So first idea is we need to study what's coming. Then we need to have a more active voice, not just locally with respect to passing ordinances and doing what we can with the budget, but then also trying to push policy up at the state level. So those are my ideas on those fronts.
Ted Przylski.
Okay, I want to echo Teresa's comments on bus service. We need to make sure that that's accessible because for a lot of folks that is the only way they have of getting basic services, and that doesn't just apply to the elderly but all kinds of folks. I'm also going to invoke something that I know that I'm looking around the room and there are a lot of people here that may have worked against it, but the ADUs are allowing a lot of people to age in place. Family in one house and, they're in the back house living independently, but they can still, work with their family. And the other thing, I'm almost done. Okay, I'll let that go. I had 25 seconds.
Thank you. You weren't done. You had more time. That was a question. Okay. Pamela Powers.
Okay, thank you for that question. And so one of the things that I proposed when I was in the legislature is to help people stay in their homes, because we have a lot of parts of Tucson that's being gentrified, and so we have a lot of senior citizens who are living in homes that they have owned for a long time and they might be paid for, but they're living on a fixed income, and so their property taxes are going up. And so I think that we should have property tax support for low-income seniors to help them stay in their homes, because we know the rental, we don't want to stick the seniors on the rental market because that's even worse. I also think that we should look at not just the bus, but better sidewalks and more wheelchair ramps. There's a lot of messed up sidewalks in this town. And, I had a really good friend who fell in a parking garage recently, and it's like he's got serious problems because it was a dimly lit parking garage. So let's have some better sidewalks, some more wheelchair ramps, a little safety lighting, the free bus for the seniors, help them out with their property taxes. That's what I think.
Christopher Layton.
Yeah, I agree. Complete streets would go a long ways to helping seniors and everybody getting around. And the ADU, I do know is controversial, but I do think it's a great way to help people age in place.
Thank you. Charlie Verdon.
Echo, everything they just said. Can I cede my time to Ted so he can finish his thought? I feel like he'd add a lot. As for me, the only other thing I can continue to pound on is is investing and assisting with more affordable housing that affects almost everybody here in town, but it is especially going to continue to affect people on a fixed income as the limited availability of affordable housing keeps hiking up our rent prices. I don't want to see more people out on the streets than already are. I would like to see fewer, and I think that's the biggest route towards that.
Thank you. Karen Ulick.
One of the things that I've learned working in the Medicaid system is that the health impact of social isolation is equivalent to smoking a pack of cigarettes a day. That's how much it affects us, our hearts and our bodies and our well-being. So free transit is critical, and I think in addition to ADUs, which I agree contribute toward a solution, I think there are other models, shared housing. I just moved, and I'm renting the back of one of my closest friends' houses, and we share the kitchen, right? I think a lot of people are inclined toward co-housing and shared housing, but don't know how to find the right person. And is that person safe and right, and what are the protections? So lots of reform opportunities, but I think opening up more avenues like that is incredibly exciting, and there's lots of potential here in Tucson for that.
Thank you. Nina Trasoff.
I'm one of the lucky ones. I own my home. I've been in it since 1981. It's way too big for me. I've thought about downsizing. I don't want to. I am Friday morning meeting with an architect to begin construction of my auxiliary dwelling unit. And my older son told me last week that he and his family are moving back to Tucson in 3 years, so I have 3 years to get this together. But for me, what the piece is, as an elder, is I'm going to have my son and my daughter-in-law in the house next to me, so that if it gets to the point where I can no longer take care of myself, I don't go to an institution. I have my son and my daughter-in-law there with me. It's that continuity. It's also, they have a special needs child who will be living with them forever. So everything that's been said here, we need to watch out for each other, especially this population.
Thank you. Alex Terrazas.
Yes, I support affordable and shared housing, including wraparound services, bus services that are tailored to older adults and reflect their needs. Reaching out through video and Zoom check-ins and activities could be a way to stay in touch with the older population. Safer streets, better sidewalks, completely agree, and also heat trauma prevention. I think this is something that could be a real concern here in the summers as we're getting hotter. And then also I would like to hearken back to what I was talking about with support for investments in mental health and substance use disorder treatments, which affect all Americans, all citizens of Tucson, and the older folks are not alone among them. So, thank you.
Thank you. Ravi Shah.
Thank you. And as a family physician, I've served patients right here in Ward 6 for a decade, first at U of A Banner and now at El Rio. And while I see patients of all ages, a lot of my patients are elderly, and I hear their stories. The affordability we've mentioned, housing, utilities, medications, the loneliness that Karen mentioned with the social isolation. And I see it with my own father, my dad. He's almost 80 years old, and he lives with me. And this is his own issues with a lot of these things in isolation, especially after my mom passed away of breast cancer a few years ago right in our house. I think one thing I'll add to the other comments in terms of solving problems is really, I think it's great at our city of Tucson has so many nonprofits. I think we have the more nonprofits per capita in the country. But I think that means a lot of disjointed services. And one of the things I want to do as your alderman, or as your city council member, is to really work on coordinating services with all of our nonprofits. We have so many disjointed services. We have FEMA Council of Aging. We have a lot of healthcare providers, mental health providers, other things on social services. And how can we work together, and how can we as a city lead to coordinate services on addressing elder care, on addressing housing and crime and other issues.
Miranda Schubert.
So many great points have already been made, as I expected, being the last one to respond. I will add that, issues like fare-free transit, the ADU ordinance, and also just generally looking to diversify our local housing stock, because the vast majority of it is zoned for single-family housing. These were all things that prompted me to found Tucson for Everyone a few years ago, a local housing and transit advocacy group that we really strive to connect constituents with the ways that they can participate in crafting local policy that impacts them so much. And I believe that in order to allow more things like multi-generational housing, aging in place, really requires taking a look at innovative ways to use our land differently and to promote things like densification, mixed-use development, but also accompany it with rigorous measures to protect against gentrification and displacement. I also agree about ADU accessibility and universal accessibility in general.
Thank you. We'll now move on to closing statements. Each candidate will have 1 minute to respond. We begin this evening first with opening remarks from my far right, so we'll begin from my far left with closing statements. Christopher Layden.
Thank you. I think there's a lot of great candidates up here looking to fill the Ward 6 office. I think the outgoing council member did a great job. His staff did a great job. I would love an opportunity to carry on that work. And if it's not me, I think there's plenty of other candidates here that can do it.
Thank you.
I want to thank
Pamela Powers.
Thank you for being our moderator and keeping us in line, and the timekeeper, and for all of you showing up here tonight. I appreciate the opportunity to be able to talk with you. I think I have some good background that would be helpful on the City Council, but as he said, there's a lot of good candidates out here and a lot of good ideas, and we're all ready to serve you, and so thanks for coming.
Thank you. Ted Przylski.
I'll go ahead and make that last thing I was going to talk about. Just what the heck. A few years ago, the fire department realized how many calls they were getting that were just generated by folks who were socially isolated or who just needed a ride to the hospital so they could get insulin. And so that evolved eventually into a program that now we have folks that just respond to things like that. And we need a city leadership that's creative enough to allow that sort of thing to go on. As for me, I'm Ted Przylski. I like boring policy stuff. I was on a committee with Brent over there that we regulated signage for years. I was on the bond committee. I recently worked with my labor union nationally to construct a statement on generative AI. And if you haven't lived until you've been in a room full of writers arguing about how a statement should be worded, so.
Vince Rabago.
Well, first I want to thank the League for hosting this, and I want to thank the church for having this space for us, and thank all of you for being here and being concerned and committed to want to see and hear who is going to be appointed and be ready to put your own voice into the mix. For me, it's about inclusion, it's about listening, it's about making a deliberate decision that represents everybody to make it a better Tucson. That's how I see and how I am. I'm also creative and I'm able to work collaboratively. I think, collaboration is very key. So with all of our regional partners, with our neighborhoods, with our business owners, you name it. But one thing that I didn't hear mentioned was the voice that Steve brought to this office. And I want to make sure somebody has that strong voice when needed. I'll end with this. Start by doing what's necessary, then do what's possible, and suddenly you're doing the impossible. That was St. Francis of Assisi, and I think it's important, that, given the location, that's what the kind of attitude we need to bring to this position. Thank you.
Thank you. Teresa Rial.
I would also like to thank the women and men of the League of Women Voters of Greater Tucson for having these. Their primary things are to defend democracy and support voter rights, and I think that this is a perfect example of a great job well done. So thank you. Also to Steve Kay. You've been great, so thank you for all of your service all of these years. Thanks for putting up with us. I'm sure it wasn't always, in fact, many times it wasn't great, I'm sure, but thank you for putting up with us. Recently, I was at the Sun Corridor Site Selectors meeting that they had at the Fox Theater a couple of days ago, and there were 7 people from around the nation assessing Tucson for the viability of other companies and corporations to come here. They said all sorts of great things, but the things that they mentioned that needed to be fixed, roads, our infrastructure of the dealing with the state legislature. So I'd like to encourage all of you to get up there, call your congressmen, call your senators, and make sure they're realizing what we need down here.
Miranda Schubert.
Thanks, everyone, for taking the time to be here tonight. It's really inspiring to see how much we all care about this. We face many pressing issues that are all related to the same underlying question. How can Tucson respond to the changing needs of our communities without leaving people behind or sacrificing our unique local character? I've been digging into these issues through housing and transit advocacy for several years. I strongly believe that the community must have a voice in helping to craft the policies that shape our city, and that it's important to address criticism head-on because ultimately it makes outcomes stronger. As a dues-paying union member and having the opportunity to serve on city commissions, I have sharpened my understanding of local governance and how local transportation and development tangibly impact people's daily lives. Even before council members were paid a livable wage, I ran for the Ward 6 seat and connected with 10,000 residents. I was endorsed by organizations including the Pima Area Labor Federation, Las Adelitas, Arizona, CWA, Arizona State Council, CWA Local 7000, and the Arizona Working Families Party. I've spent years working and organizing alongside many of the people.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ravi Shaw.
Thank you. I'll use my closing statement to talk about my kids, and I can't believe I've gone a whole hour without talking about them. And in the future, that's what it's all about. I have 3 kids. They're all TUSC students. My oldest is a 6th grader, and I have twins in kindergarten. And I bring them up here now because that's what I do, is making sure that we have a sustainable future for them and for all of our kids and grandkids and nieces and nephews and others in Tucson. I'm selfish. I want a future where my kids can find great jobs here in Tucson and I can be with my grandkids down the street, like I hear so many stories. And to do so, we need economic development. We need diversity of jobs. We need a future that's sustainable, water and heat and resiliency. We have a lot of work to do now so that a future, a generation later, can be a reality. So I want to be part of your city council so I can work for futures for my kids, for all of our kids here in Tucson, and for the next generation.
Thank you. Alex Terrazas.
Yes, I would like to bring my special set of unique experiences to bear on the role of City Councilman for Ward 6, City Council for Ward 6. I would like to promote the idea of a half-cent sales tax for 10 years to support mental health and substance use treatments. Those are foundational. They'll make a difference in all of the areas that we're talking about today, or most of them. I also would like to support open data so that we can do a better job of being transparent and for innovating around data science in the city, and that includes statistical policing and P&I efforts. So I don't have the answer to every policy question offered tonight, but I can tell you that I'll put my energies towards that and bring my special skill set to bear on those issues.
Thank you. Nina Trasoff.
I am so glad I came tonight to hear what this marvelous group of people have to offer. I was asked to put my name in at the beginning when Steve first announced, and I'm a logical choice. I've done the job, I can hit the ground running, I'm passionate about this community, and I will not run for re-election. And I thought that was a really important thing, that we don't want to give the heads up or extra weight to one person by an appointment if they're going to then run for the seat, because y'all need to decide whom you want to nominate for that position when it comes to election time. That said, I've been so impressed. Part of why I did it was because I really thought I had a unique voice. I have a strong voice, but it's not a unique voice. I'm passionate, but everybody up here is. I didn't really want to do it, but I thought I could make a difference, and I was supposed to do this because there was nobody else.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I'm going to ask indulgence for one extra sentence. I am withdrawing my name. We have wonderful people here. I don't think you need me. I think I do a great job. I don't think you need me. We have other people here, and so I am removing my name from consideration this evening.
Wow.
Thank you, Nina. We appreciate that. That's sincere. Karen Ulick.
I'm staying in. Thanks, Nina. It really is an incredible group of folks willing and ready to serve, and it just depends what's important in this moment, is what I felt. Not running, not only it's about tipping the scales in my mind, but it's campaigning, especially for the first time, is more than a full-time job. It is hard. Couple that with a learning curve in the new city council position, that's a lot. And I want Ward 6, and I want the city to have a full set of folks ready on deck, working hard with our new city manager to deliver for Ward 6. I feel that I did that well for Ward 3. I'd be honored and privileged to do that during this interim period. Thank you.
Thank you. Charlie Verdon.
I owe a lot to the city of Tucson, and I'm always looking for ways to give back. A position on the city council is a major opportunity to dedicate my experience and my time towards serving the city. I think it's important to have policy priorities that are rooted in compassion and tempered by practicality. I support the council's continued efforts to assist our needy in respectful and humane ways, and generally to do the difficult, often thankless work of keeping a deceptively large city like ours running smoothly. It's tough work, but I'm up to the task. I'm Charlie Verdon, and thank you all for inviting me and hearing me out. And thank you all for also coming. Y'all did a great job.
Thank you. The League of Women Voters of Greater Tucson are pleased to have been part of presenting tonight's forum. The League is an all-volunteer organization that is committed to educating and assisting the public in a nonpartisan way to understanding issues and candidates. Thank you to our candidates for an outstanding forum. Thank you for the folks of Our Savior's Lutheran Church building allowing us to utilize this. Thank you all tonight. Thank you, everyone.